Alina never thought her life would change because of a poster. It was a regular Monday morning, the kind where nothing special ever happened, and she was walking home from school with her backpack slipping off her shoulder. The street smelled like fresh rain, cars splashing through puddles, and she hummed a soft tune under her breath, something she had been working on in her mind during math class. Her mind was always full of music, like there was a radio inside her that never switched off. She didn't talk much at school, but when she touched piano keys, it felt like her real voice came out. She passed the same corner shop she always crossed, the one with dusty windows and a faded sign. And that's when her eyes caught something new on the bulletin board outside. A large poster, clean and crisp like it had just been printed, was pinned to the cork panel, shining under the streetlight. The headline at the top was bold, almost glowing: National Academy of Music, Open Editions for Young Musicians. Under it, there was a picture of a grand hall, golden lights, a polished piano on stage, and a crowd in elegant clothes. Alina felt her breath stick in her throat, like she had forgotten how to inhale. She stepped closer, her shoes making a soft splash in a puddle, her heart beating faster. The poster said the auditions were open to anyone between the ages of 10 to 18, and the top performers could win scholarships and a place in the academy. She read the line at least 3 times, eyes wide. Anyone could audition, not only with private training, not only with recommendation letters, just anyone. Her fingers shook a little, not from fear but from a spark of hope that she didn't know how to handle. The academy was famous, like really famous, the kind of place she only saw on magazine covers in the library or documentaries she watched on the old TV at home. Students who got in there performed in international concerts, some even played with orchestras, and their names appeared in newspapers and music blogs. It felt like a world so far away from her own that it almost hurt to imagine stepping inside it. Alina's family lived in a small apartment above a bakery, the walls thin enough to hear the sound of trays being pulled from ovens at 4 a.m. Her piano was older than her parents' marriage, an instrument that had been passed down from someone's uncle to someone's friend until it finally reached them. The keys were uneven, some slightly chipped, and the tune never held perfectly no matter how much her father tried to fix it. But when she played it, it felt like everything was right, like her hands and the piano understood each other in a secret way. Sometimes, neighbors would stop outside the basement window just to listen, their footsteps pausing on the sidewalk as her music drifted out. But still, she never imagined standing on a real stage, not until now. Not until this poster. She stood there, getting rained on without realizing it, her hair sticking to her cheeks, her backpack slowly getting heavier with water. But she didn't move, she just stared and stared, reading every tiny detail like her future depended on memorizing each word. The audition date was only 3 weeks away. 3 weeks. Her heart felt like it was trying to climb out of her chest. 3 weeks wasn't a long time, and she didn't have a teacher anymore. Her family had stopped her lessons last year when the bills got too heavy and her mother had to take extra shifts. They never blamed Alina, not even once. They always told her that she was talented, that her gift was still hers even without lessons. But talent doesn't pay for academy auditions. Confidence doesn't replace training books. Still, here was a chance, staring her in the face, calling her. She copied the email address and website into her phone, her fingers trembling like she might accidentally erase the words. Her shoes squeaked as she ran home, puddles splashing, her breath coming fast. The poster burned into her memory. When she reached the apartment, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery below drifted up the stairs, warm and comforting. Her mother was folding laundry on the couch, her younger brother doing homework at the table, and her father washing dishes in the tiny kitchen sink. Everything looked so normal, like any other day, but Alina felt different inside, like something had shifted. She stood at the doorway for a moment, trying to catch her breath, her clothes still wet from the rain. "Ma," she said quietly, her voice a mix of excitement and fear. Her mother looked up, concern flashing in her eyes when she saw the state of her clothes. "What happened? Did you fall? Are you all right?" she asked, placing the laundry aside. "I'm fine," Alina said, shaking her head. I just..." I saw something. Her father turned off the tap. Her brother lifted his head. Pencils paused in midair. What is it? Her father asked, drying his hands. Alina didn't know how to start, how to explain the weight of that poster in her mind. She took a deep breath, wiped her wet hair back, and said softly, "There's an audition for the National Music Academy." The room went quiet, like someone had turned down the volume of life. "Anyone can join," she added, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother blinked slowly, processing the words. Her father leaned against the counter, the dish towel hanging from his hand like he forgot he was holding it. Her brother's eyes widened, impressed. Alina swallowed, the biggest question sitting on her tongue. "Can I try?" The silence felt endless, stretching like an invisible rope, ready to snap or hold her together. Her parents exchanged a look, one of those wordless conversations adults have, where their eyes say everything they don't know how to put into sentences. Her mother spoke first, gentle but honest. "You know we can't afford lessons again," she said, her voice soft instead of sharp. "We barely manage the rent and the bills." Alina nodded, not surprised. She knew this. She lived it every day. Her father exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "It's not that we don't believe in you," he said, choosing each word carefully like fragile glass. "We believe in you more than anything." Her heart ached at the kindness in his voice. "But this academy, it's not a small thing," he said. "The judges there, they are strict, they look for trained students." Alina nodded again. She knew that too, but she also knew what it felt like to have her soul tied to piano keys, to feel more herself when notes flowed from her than at any other moment in her life. She stepped forward, her voice steadier now. "I know I'm not from a big school," she said. "And I know our piano is old, and I don't have a teacher anymore, but I want to try." Her brother looked at her like she was a superhero. Her mother closed her eyes, breathing in, thinking deeply. Her father stared at the table, then finally said, "If you want this, then try." Alina's eyes widened, her heart lifting a little. "It won't be easy," her father continued. "You will have to work harder than ever." "I will," she said immediately, like she had been waiting her whole life to say those words. "And we can't promise anything," her mother added gently. "But we won't stop you." Alina nodded, tears pricking her eyes, not from sadness, but from the feeling of being seen. She walked to the basement where the piano stood, the room lit by a single bulb that flickered sometimes. She sat on the stool, the wood creaking softly, the keys cold under her fingertips. She closed her eyes, inhaled, and pressed the first note. It rang out, slightly imperfect, but it felt right, like the beginning of something, the beginning of her future, her risk, her dream. She didn't know what would happen at the audition. She didn't know if she would fail or succeed, but she knew this. She was going to try, no matter what, because sometimes trying is the bravest thing a person can do, and sometimes trying changes everything. So that night, in a basement with peeling paint and old music sheets scattered on the floor, Alina began her journey. One note at a time, one heartbeat at a time. The poster outside had taken root in her mind, growing like a spark of light in a dark room. She played until her fingers were tired, until her back ached, until her eyes grew heavy. But she didn't stop, because every note felt like a step toward the stage she had only seen in magazines. Every note felt like a promise to herself, a promise that she was more than the limits around her. And somewhere deep in her heart, she felt it. The announcement wasn't just a poster, it was a calling, and she was ready to answer. Alina woke up the next morning before her alarm rang. The sun wasn't even out yet, the sky outside her window still a deep shade of blue, but her eyes were wide open, her mind replaying the poster again and again like a movie stuck on repeat. She could almost see the stage, hear the applause, feel the keys of a perfectly tuned piano under her fingertips. A small smile formed on her face as she sat up, stretching her arms, feeling soreness from the hours she practiced last night. But she didn't mind. It felt like the kind of soreness that meant progress, like her muscles remembered her dream even when her mind was tired. She got dressed quietly so she wouldn't wake her brother. Then tiptoed to the kitchen where the smell of coffee already filled the air. Her father sat at the table, sipping slowly while reading the newspaper. His hair messy and eyes tired. But when he saw her, his expression softened. "You're up early," he said, setting the paper down. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, pulling out a chair. "I kept thinking about the audition." Her father nodded, tapping his fingers on the table in a slow rhythm, like he was thinking carefully. "You're sure this is what you want?" he asked. No pressure in his voice, just concern. "I'm sure," she whispered, her voice small but steady. That seemed to be enough because he smiled, a gentle, proud smile, the kind that said he believed in her even though he was scared for her too. Before she left for school, he reached into his pocket and pressed a small folded note into her hand. It was a schedule he made for her, a plan showing how she could manage school, chores, and practice time. He had written little reminders in the corners, like, "Drink water," and "Rest your hands," so she wouldn't push herself too hard. Her heart warmed at the sight, and she hugged him quickly before heading out. At school, the world felt different, like someone had turned the colors brighter and the sounds sharper. She noticed how her classmates talked about weekend trips, dance lessons, and art clubs, things she couldn't afford. But instead of feeling left out, she felt motivated. They had their stories, but she was writing hers, one note at a time. During lunch, Alina sat with a girl from her history class. A quiet girl with round glasses and a habit of doodling stars on her notebooks. Alina liked her because she never judged, she just listened. When Alina mentioned the audition, her friend's eyes widened behind her glasses. "You know Maestro Reinhardt is a judge this year, right?" she asked in a whisper, like saying the name too loudly might summon him. Alina shook her head, her fork halfway to her mouth, appetite suddenly fading. "You don't know about him?" her friend asked, leaning in. He's famous, but not in a friendly way." Alina listened as her friend explained, her words slow and full of caution. Maestro Reinhardt was a respected conductor, a man who had spent decades in music, performing with some of the biggest orchestras in the world. But he was also known for being strict, brutally honest, and sometimes even cold. He had a reputation for saying harsh things to students who didn't meet his standards, and many young musicians left auditions in tears because of his feedback. It wasn't that he was cruel for fun, people said. It was that he demanded perfection. He wanted every note clean, every expression intentional, every performance professional, even from kids still learning who they were. Alina swallowed hard, the cafeteria noise fading as her chest tightened. She imagined standing in front of someone like that, someone who could look at her file, see her lack of training, and dismiss her before she even played a single note. The idea scared her. It really did, like cold water running down her spine. But the fear didn't push her away. It pulled her closer to determination. She knew she didn't have the same background as other contestants. She knew her piano wasn't in perfect condition, and she knew her fingers sometimes stumbled when she was nervous, but she also knew that when she played, something happened inside her. Something real, something honest, something bigger than the mistakes. She wasn't just playing notes, she was telling her story. And maybe, just maybe, that was something worth showing even to someone like Reinhardt. That afternoon, when the final bell rang, she rushed back home, dropped her bag on the floor, and went straight to the basement. She ran her fingers across the piano keys, feeling their familiar texture, the smoothness on some, the rough edges on others. Her mother peeked in a few minutes later, a small lunchbox in her hands. "You forgot your lunch today," she said, holding it out. "You must have been distracted." Alina took it with a sheepish smile, thanking her. Her mother didn't leave right away. She leaned against the doorway, watching her daughter in the warm glow of the basement light. "You know," she said softly, "I heard something today in the bakery." Alina looked up, wondering what she meant. Customers were talking. Her mother continued. "They were saying this year's auditions are going to be harder than ever." Alina felt her stomach sink slightly. "There's going to be a judge there, Maestro Reinhardt," her mother said, trying to pronounce the name carefully. "People say he's strict, Strict was a gentle word compared to what Alina felt inside. The storm of nerves that tried to rise in her chest. Her mother must have seen the worry in her eyes, because she stepped forward and took Alina's hand. "I don't want you to be afraid," she said, squeezing her fingers gently. "Just be yourself, that's enough." Alina nodded, not sure she believed that completely, but grateful that her mother did. Over the next several days, life became a rhythm of school, homework, chores, and practice. Sometimes she got tired. Sometimes her fingers cramped. Sometimes the music felt messy and wrong. But other times, her hands moved like they had minds of their own, flowing across the keys like water, the melodies blooming in the air like flowers opening in sunlight. On those days, she forgot about Maestro Reinhardt. She forgot about Maestro Reinhardt. She forgot about the academy. She forgot about fear. On those days, she remembered why she loved music. It felt like home, even when home was complicated. It felt like breathing, even when life felt like holding your breath. One evening, her brother came down the stairs and sat cross-legged on the floor next to the piano, watching her play. "You're really good," he said with the blunt honesty only siblings have. Alina smiled, turning a little pink. "I'm trying to be," she said. "You already are," he replied, like it was the simplest truth in the world. The basement became her sanctuary, the place where she stored her dreams and her doubts, where she let herself be scared and brave at the same time. Some nights, she could almost picture the academy hall, the lights bright enough to make her squint, the audience silent, the judges watching. In her imagination, she would sit at the piano, take a deep breath, and play the opening notes. She didn't imagine perfection. She imagined honesty. She imagined telling her story through the keys, the years of practice, the days she wanted to give up, the nights she stayed awake thinking of a life bigger than her small apartment. She imagined Reinhardt sitting there, not smirking, not mocking, just listening, just hearing her. That alone felt like a victory, but the fear never disappeared completely. It sat beside her like a quiet companion, reminding her that dreams are scary because they matter. Sometimes she wished she could fast forward to the audition day, just to know how it ended. But then she remembered something her father always said. If you jump to the ending, you miss the story. And this right here was her story. The late nights, the early mornings, the doubts, the excitement, the fear, the hope, that was all part of it. Her story wasn't waiting for the audition, it was happening right now. Note by note, breath by breath. One night, while practicing, she paused mid-song, her fingers floating above the keys. She thought about Maestro Reinhardt again, the stories about him, the expectations, the harshness, and instead of letting fear control her, she whispered to herself, "I'm not going there to be perfect. I'm going there to be me." The words sounded strange in the quiet basement, but they also felt right, like something new and strong unfolding inside her. She played again, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, and that desire, that love for music, felt like her greatest strength, even more than skill or training. She didn't know if it would be enough. She didn't know if Reinhardt would see it. She didn't know if she would pass the audition. But she knew she would show up. She would sit at that piano, look at those judges, and offer them everything she had. Not just notes, not just sound, but heart, real heart, the kind that beats through music like a second pulse. Days turned into a week, then two, and soon only a handful of days remained before the audition. The closer the date got, the faster Alina's heartbeat felt, like a metronome stuck on the highest tempo. At school, she found herself lost in thought during lessons, her mind traveling to the academy hall like it was calling her by name. Her teachers sometimes noticed, gently tapping her desk to bring her back. Her friends asked if she was okay, and she would smile, a tired but hopeful smile. "I'm just thinking," she would say, and they nodded, understanding even if they didn't know the details. One day, as she walked home, she passed the same bulletin board where it all started. The poster was still there, edges slightly curled from the weather but still just as bright, just as full of promise. She stood in front of it for a moment, her hand hovering over the paper, not touching but close enough to feel connected. It didn't scare her like it did the first time. It didn't feel impossible. Felt like a doorway. She took a deep breath, stepped back, and whispered to herself, "I'm ready." Maybe she wasn't fully ready. Maybe no one ever really is before something big. But she was ready enough. And that was all she needed. As she walked away from the board, the streetlights flickering to life above her, the sound of her footsteps echoing on the pavement, she felt something calm settle in her heart. She wasn't alone. She had her family, her music, her dreams, and the courage to try. And courage, she realized, could take a person farther than fear ever could. So as the audition day approached, Alina didn't focus on perfection. She focused on truth. Not the truth of training or flawless technique, but the truth of a girl who loved music enough to chase it, even when the path was uphill. And somewhere in the city, Maestro Reinhardt, the man she feared and respected from afar, was preparing too, unaware that a girl from a bakery apartment was practicing in a basement, ready to stand before him and show him her heart, not with words, but with music, because that was where her true voice lived. And soon he would hear it. Soon the world would hear it. Soon the story would reach its next page. But for now, she practiced and she dreamed and she believed, because the journey itself was already changing her, already shaping her into the person she needed to be. And that was the quiet magic of it all. The morning of the audition didn't feel like a regular morning. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Alina woke up before the sun again. But this time, there was no quiet smile, no excitement buzzing inside her. Instead, her heart felt heavy, like she was carrying invisible books stacked on her chest. She sat at the edge of her bed, her hands pressed together, her breath slow and shaky. Her room looked the same as always, the posters on the wall, the stack of sheet music on the chair, her school backpack leaning against the dresser. But nothing felt normal. Everything felt like a countdown. Her mother knocked softly, not pushing the door all the way open, just peeking in. "You need to eat something," she said gently, "even if it's just a little." Alina nodded even though her stomach felt like it was full of knots. She forced herself to get up, get dressed, and walk to the kitchen where her father was already waiting. He had made her a sandwich and tea, arranging them on the table like a ceremony. "I know it's hard to eat," he said, "but you need energy." She took a small bite, not tasting anything, just chewing mechanically. Her brother sat across from her, swinging his legs nervously, like he was going to the audition instead of her. "You're going to be great," he said, his voice full of faith, the kind she wished she could borrow. When it was time to leave, her parents walked her to the door. Her mother kissed her forehead, smoothing her hair like she used to do when Alina was little. Her father squeezed her shoulder and handed her the folded practice schedule, like a reminder that preparation was part of bravery. Her brother hugged her tightly, whispering, "Play like you do at home." That sentence stuck with her, like a small light she could carry inside. Play like you do at home. Not perfect, not flawless, not like anyone else, just like her. The academy was across town, in a neighborhood that looked nothing like where she lived. The streets were lined with tall trees that formed arches of leaves overhead, and the buildings were modern, all glass and clean walls that reflected the sky. As she and her father reached the academy gate, she saw other contestants arriving. Some stepped out of expensive cars, dressed in tailored coats and scarves that looked like they belonged on magazine covers. Some walked confidently, holding music folders embossed with gold lettering from renowned music schools. She swallowed hard, her thrift store dress and scuffed shoes suddenly feeling like they were made of paper. Too fragile for a place like this. Inside, the academy lobby was enormous, with shining floors that looked like mirrors and ceilings so high she felt small just looking at them. A grand staircase curved upward, like something from a movie set, and banners with the academy's logo hung from the walls. Students and parents filled the space, talking in hushed tones, their voices echoing faintly. A woman with a clipboard directed people toward the registration desk, her smile polite but rushed. Alina joined the line, her heart pounding in her ears. her palms sweating. When it was her turn, the woman asked for her name and age, then handed her a number, 47, a small sticker to place on her chest. It felt strange being reduced to a number, but she pressed it onto her dress anyway, her fingers trembling slightly. She and her father stood in the waiting area where rows of chairs faced the stage doors. Contestants sat with their instruments, tuning violins, practicing scales quietly on flutes, stretching their arms, humming vocal warm-ups. Alina watched, her nerves rising like a tide. She didn't have anything to tune. She didn't have warm-up exercises memorized. She didn't have a teacher by her side. She only had her hands and her heart. And today, she hoped that was enough. A girl a few chairs away looked at her and smiled kindly. "You look nervous," she said. Not unkindly, just observant. "I am," Alina admitted, her voice thin. "It's okay. We all are," the girl replied, gesturing to the room. "Even the ones who pretend they're not." Her calmness helped a little, like someone had thrown her a rope she could hold for balance. "What are you performing?" the girl asked. "A mix," Alina said, unsure of how to describe it. "Part classical, part me." The girl blinked, surprised but interested. "That's brave," she said. "I'm doing a Mozart piece, the same one I've studied for 2 years." Brave? Alina didn't feel brave, but she nodded like she understood. As more contestants went in and came out, some crying softly, some smiling with relief, some looking blank like they had left their emotions inside the hall, the name Maestro Reinhardt echoed from conversations around her. "That judge is terrifying," someone whispered. "He stopped a boy mid-performance last year," another said, eyes wide. "He told a girl her technique was a disaster dressed as music," someone else added. Alina's chest tightened again, her throat dry, her fingers shaking. Her father noticed and gently took her hand. "You don't have to prove anything to him," he said quietly. "Just play for yourself. Play like you do at home." The words came back, warm and familiar, like a hug she couldn't see. A voice called from the stage doors. "Number 47. Felt like the world paused. Her father squeezed her hand. Her breath caught. Her feet refused to move for a second. Then she stood, her legs feeling heavy but determined. She walked to the double doors, each step like a beat in her heartbeat. The doors opened, and she stepped inside. The auditorium was huge, bigger than she imagined. Rows and rows of empty seats stretched out in front of her like an ocean of faded red fabric. The stage lights were bright, too bright, making her blink hard as her eyes adjusted. In the center of the stage stood a sleek black grand piano, polished like a mirror, the kind she had only seen in photos. 3 judges sat at a long table below the stage, clipboards in front of them, expressions neutral. One of them was Maestro Reinhardt. His hair was silver, his suit crisp, and his posture straight, like a man who never allowed himself to bend. He didn't smile, he didn't frown, he just looked at her, eyes sharp like he could see more than what was visible. "What will you be performing?" he asked, his voice firm, his accent sharp. Alina swallowed slowly, her voice trembling as she answered. "A classical fusion piece," she said. "My own arrangement." A flicker of surprise crossed the faces of the other judges, but Maestro Reinhardt simply raised an eyebrow. "Very well," he said, leaning back slightly. "You may begin." She walked to the piano, every step echoing in the silence. She sat, her fingers hovering above the keys, her heart loud in her ears. Her breath trembled as she exhaled. For a moment, her mind went blank, her memory scattering like papers in the wind. But then, she closed her eyes and heard her brother's voice again. "Play like you do at home." She took a deep breath and pressed the first note. It rang through the hall, soft but clear. She moved into the opening sequence, her fingers unsure for a moment, then steadying as the melody unfolded. Her nervousness didn't disappear, but it melted into the background, like a shadow behind her instead of in front of her. Each note felt like a step forward, each chord a declaration that she was here, that she mattered. She didn't play perfectly, A few notes slipped, her timing hesitated once, but she didn't stop. She kept going, letting the music grow, letting her heart lead her hands. She reached the part she composed herself, the part that belonged only to her, the part not found in any sheet music book or lesson plan. The melody rose, soft at first, then fuller, like it grew wings, like it remembered how to fly. Her fingers danced, trembling but honest. The notes shaping stories she never said out loud. The sacrifices her parents made. The quiet hours in the basement. The fear she carried. The courage she tried to grow. It was all inside the music now, spilling out, filling the hall, reaching every corner like light. When she reached the final chord, she let it linger, her hands hovering above the keys as the sound faded into silence. She stayed still, afraid to look up, afraid to see their faces. She stared at her trembling hands instead, the hands that carried her dreams all the way here. The silence stretched on, longer than she expected. Long enough to make her doubt everything she just did. Long enough to make her stomach twist into a knot. Finally, she lifted her gaze. The judges weren't writing. They weren't whispering. They weren't frowning. They were just silent. Maestro Reinhardt's expression was unreadable. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in study, like he was trying to understand something. Then he spoke, his voice steadier and quieter than before. "Thank you," he said. No mockery, no cruelty, no dramatic reaction. Just 2 words. But they felt like a door opening a crack, like an invitation to hope. Alina nodded, her voice gone, her throat too tight to speak. She stood, bowed awkwardly, and walked off the stage, her legs shaky, like she was learning to walk for the first time. When she reached the lobby again, her father stood up immediately, concern written all over him. "How did it go?" he asked, searching her face, afraid to hope too loudly. I don't know," she said honestly, her voice small but not broken. "I gave everything I had." Her father wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "That's enough," he whispered. "Whatever happens next, you did something brave." As they stepped outside, the afternoon sun greeted them, warm and forgiving. Alina felt tired, but it wasn't the tiredness of defeat. It was the tiredness of someone who had climbed a mountain they once feared, someone who had reached the top and looked around, realizing they were stronger than they thought. The results weren't posted yet, they wouldn't know for days, but for the first time that didn't scare her as much, because she had done the hardest part. She had shown up, she had played, she had been seen, and that, for today, was enough. More than enough. Because sometimes the bravest thing is not winning. Sometimes the bravest thing is stepping on the stage at all. And Alina had done that, with shaking hands, with a trembling heart, with honesty in her music. She had done that. As she walked away from the academy, she didn't feel small anymore. She felt like someone who had taken the first real step of her story. Someone who had begun. And beginnings, she realized, could be powerful. Even if they were messy, even if they were scary, even if they were uncertain. Beginnings were where dreams learned to breathe. And her dream was breathing now. Slowly, softly, but definitely alive. The days after the audition felt strange. Not empty, not exactly. Just filled with a kind of weighting that sat in her chest like a heavy stone. Alina kept replaying her performance in her mind. Every note, every slip, every breath. Sometimes she convinced herself she had done well, that maybe, just maybe, she had shown something real. Other times, doubt crept in like a slow fog, telling her that her hands had shaken too much, that her timing had stumbled, that Reinhardt had noticed everything wrong and nothing right. She didn't talk about the audition much, not because she didn't want to, but because she felt like saying it out loud might break the delicate hope she was trying to protect. Hope felt fragile, like glass, like one wrong word could crack it, so she held it gently, quietly, like something that needed warmth to survive. Her family didn't push her. They just watched her with soft eyes, checking in without asking too many questions. Life didn't stop. Chores still needed doing. Bills still needed paying. School assignments still needed to be handed in on time. But through everything, There was this unspoken awareness that something was coming. Good or bad, it was coming. One afternoon, about a week later, the academy finally sent an email. Alina almost didn't open it, her finger hovering over the screen, her heart racing like it wanted to run away. Her mother stood beside her, her father behind her, her brother peeking around the corner with wide, curious eyes. She took a shaky breath and tapped the message. The email was short, formal, and to the point. It thanked her for auditioning, stated that the judges had reached a decision, and then it asked her to attend the academy the following Saturday for a results presentation and feedback session. Her brain froze on the words, reading them over and over, unsure if this meant good news or bad news. "Does that mean you got in?" her brother asked, bouncing slightly on his toes. "I don't know," Alina whispered, her voice barely there. "They didn't say." Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "We will go and find out," he said softly. "No matter what, you won't face it alone." Saturday arrived faster than she expected. Her family came with her this time, crowding into the small bus like a support team. Their presence wrapped around her like invisible armor. Her mother held her hand the entire trip, her thumb brushing circles of comfort across her skin. Her father sat beside them, silent but present, like a wall that wouldn't let fear get too close. Her brother hummed the tune she had played at the audition, not perfectly, but enough that she recognized the melody. Hearing it made her chest feel warm, like a candle had been lit in her ribs. When they reached the academy, the lobby was filled with contestants again. Some looked excited, buzzing with energy. Smiles stretched across their faces like they couldn't hold them in. Others looked pale, nervous, chewing their nails or tapping their shoes rapidly on the floor. The atmosphere felt thick with expectation, like the air itself was waiting too. A staff member directed them to a large auditorium where seats were arranged in neat rows facing the stage. On the stage were 3 chairs and a table, the judges' seats. Maestro Reinhardt was already there, speaking quietly to another judge, his posture straight, his expression serious. Seeing him again made something flutter inside Alina's stomach, a mix of fear and adrenaline. Her hands felt cold, like the nerves were crawling up her fingers and stealing the warmth. Her family sat behind her, giving her the front row like they believed she deserved to be closest to the future, whatever shape it took. As more contestants arrived, the room filled with soft chatter, the kind that feels like a storm is about to break. Then the lights dimmed slightly, and the judges took their seats. Maestro Reinhardt cleared his throat, the microphone picking up the sound and sending it through the speakers. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady and controlled. "We witnessed many performances during the audition round, and we are grateful for the effort each of you put into your music." His tone wasn't warm, but it wasn't cruel either, just professional. He continued, explaining that the academy had selected a limited number of students for the next stage, that not everyone would make it, but that every performance mattered in its own way. People listened, some leaning forward, some sinking deeper into their seats, bracing for impact. After the speech, the judges began calling names. One by one, they announced who had passed, who would continue to the next phase, who would be given a scholarship interview. Each time a name was called, someone gasped or cried, or stood up with their hands covering their mouth, overwhelmed. Alina's heartbeat got louder with every announcement, like a drum inside her chest, drowning out the sounds around her. She wasn't sure if she was breathing properly, her breaths shallow and quick, like her lungs were too small to hold enough air. Minutes passed, names continued, and still hers wasn't called. Her stomach twisted, panic clawing at her throat, whispering that maybe this was it. Maybe she had reached the end of her story before it had even begun. Her brother leaned forward, his small hand resting on her shoulder. "It's not over yet," he whispered, voice trembling but hopeful. Then, finally, Maestro Reinhardt spoke again. "We have one more name to announce," he said, scanning the paper in front of him, his eyes narrowing slightly. A hush fell so quickly it felt like the room inhaled at the same time. He looked up, eyes focused somewhere in the front rows. "Alina Cruz," he said, Her name echoed in her mind like a bell. Her body went still, the world tilting for a moment, like her brain needed time to catch up to reality. Her mother gasped behind her. Her father exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. Her brother let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a shout. But Alina just sat there, her eyes wide, her breath stuck. Her heartbeat a wild drumbeat that didn't know what to do now. "You may come to the stage," Reinhardt said, his eyes scanning the room until they landed directly on her. Her legs felt heavy. But somehow, she stood, her knees unsteady but functional, like they remembered how to move even if her mind didn't. She walked to the stage, each step echoing in the quiet room. Her hands clenched at her sides to stop them from shaking. When she reached the center of the stage, Reinhardt looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. It wasn't kindness, it wasn't cruelty, it was something else. Something like analysis, like curiosity. He tapped his pen against the clipboard and then spoke, his voice steady, controlled, but louder now so the room could hear. "Before I say anything else," he said, "there is something I must address." The room tensed like every seat, every wall, every person was waiting for what came next. Reinhardt leaned back slightly, adjusting his glasses, his gaze never leaving Alina. "When I reviewed your application," he said, "I saw no formal training, no academy background, no private instruction listed." A ripple of whispers moved through the audience like wind through leaves. He continued, "I also saw your lack of certification, and I made a comment," he said, his voice tightening. "I said, if she passes this audition, I will resign." The room gasped, a collective shock, like everyone had been struck at the same time. Alina's breath caught, her face flushing hot, her ears burning with embarrassment and disbelief. She hadn't known about this comment. She hadn't heard it. She hadn't been told. All she knew in this moment was that the room was looking at her. Like every pair of eyes had turned into a spotlight. Reinhardt didn't flinch, didn't lower his gaze. He let the words hang in the air, like they were part of the test, part of the performance she didn't know she was still in. Then he spoke again, slower this time, like each word was chosen carefully. "I said that because I believed skill only comes from structure, from training, from pedigree," he admitted, his voice echoing through the auditorium. "But your performance challenged that belief." The whispers faded, the room falling into a heavy silence. Her heartbeat slowed, or maybe she stopped noticing it. She wasn't sure. Reinhardt's voice softened for the first time, not warm, but no longer cold either, like a door had cracked open an inch. "Your technique is uneven," he said, honesty sharp. "Your timing slips under pressure, and your lack of instruction is obvious." Each point hit her, but they didn't crush her, not like she expected, because after every flaw, she could feel something else coming, something she didn't dare name yet. "But," Reinhardt continued, the single word cutting through the quiet like a key turning in a lock, "the emotion you carry, the originality of your arrangement, the sincerity in your playing." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "Those are rare." Alina felt her breath return, slowly, shakily, like her lungs had just remembered their job. "You are not ready for the academy as it exists today," he said, and the words stung, sharp as ice. But then he added, "However, you are someone we believe can grow into what the academy needs tomorrow." Her eyes widened, a spark of disbelief blooming in her chest like fire catching on dry wood. Reinhardt set his clipboard down, folding his hands. "You have been accepted," he said, clear and firm. "On a probationary scholarship." Gasps echoed again, her family somewhere behind her reacting with overflowing relief. "You will be evaluated every month, coached, pushed, corrected," he added. "If you do not improve, your place will be revoked." It was not a victory wrapped in a bow. It was not a perfect ending. It was an invitation, a challenge, a door that had been opened just enough for her to step through. And maybe that was better than perfection. Maybe that was exactly what she needed. Reinhardt leaned forward one last time. "You made me rethink what is possible," he said quietly, so only she could truly hear it. "Do not waste this chance." Alina swallowed, her throat tight, her eyes burning with the kind of tears that come from pride, not sadness. "I won't," she whispered, her voice shaking but sure. "I promise." She stepped back from the judge's table, her hands still trembling, her heart still pounding. But something inside her had changed. The fear was still there, yes, but now it had company. Courage stood beside it, small but steady. Possibility hovered behind it, glowing softly. Hope walked with her, lighter than before, easier to carry. As she left the stage, her family rushed to her, arms wrapping around her, voices overlapping, disbelief and joy and relief mixing in the air like music. She didn't know what the next chapter would look like. She didn't know how hard the training would be. She didn't know if she would succeed or stumble. But she knew she had earned her place, not by being perfect, but by being herself. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of everything. She looked back at the stage one last time, at Maestro Reinhardt sitting there, watching her go, not with a smirk or a frown, but with a kind of wary respect, like he had just witnessed something unexpected, something new. Alina took a deep breath, her hands curling slightly at her sides like they were already itching to touch piano keys again. The journey had only begun, and she was ready, ready to learn, ready to grow, ready to fight for her future, not with hatred, not with bitterness, but with music, always with music, because music was her voice, her armor, her map, and now it was also her ticket forward, a chance born from a risk, a dream born from a poster, a path born from a stage she was never supposed to reach, but she did reach it, and she wasn't done, not even close. This was only the start, the real beginning, the moment when fear met possibility and chose to step forward anyway. And that, Alina knew deep in her bones, was how stories changed. One tremble, one note, one promise at a time. The next week at the academy felt like walking through a brand new world. Even the air inside the building smelled different, like paper, polished wood, and something almost like possibility. Alina arrived early every day, her backpack heavy with sheet music, her heart even heavier with a mix of hope and fear. The hallways were full of students who moved like they belonged there, like they had been born in practice rooms and raised on grand pianos. They spoke about composers like close friends, about technique like it was breathing, and about performances like they were destiny. Alina felt like a guest in someone else's house, careful with every step, afraid to touch anything too hard in case it broke. She kept her gaze low, her fingers always curled nervously around the strap of her bag, her breathing shallow like she didn't want to disturb the air around her. Sometimes she wondered if she would ever feel like she fit in, if the academy would ever feel like hers too. But then she would remember Reinhardt's words, the sharp honesty followed by reluctant respect. "You made me rethink what is possible." Those words stayed with her, echoing like a soft metronome in the back of her mind. Her first official class was held in a large practice studio with tall windows that let in beams of warm sunlight. There were 12 students total, each with a piano station and a small mirror attached to watch their posture and hand position. The instructor was a woman named Ms. Irina, gentle-eyed with a voice like calm water. She introduced herself with a smile that reached her eyes, which made Alina's shoulders loosen just a little. "My goal is not to make you perfect," Ms. Irina said. "My goal is to help you grow into yourselves." It was the kindest sentence Alina had heard in the academy so far. Some students nodded confidently. Others tilted their heads like they didn't understand how growth could be enough. Alina understood it perfectly, because she had been growing all her life, just in places no one could see, like roots under soil. They started with finger exercises, scales, arpeggios, drills that made wrists ache and fingers stretch in ways they hadn't before. The room filled with sound, a river of rising and falling notes, some crisp, some flourished, some wobbly, some sharp. Alina's hands trembled the first few minutes, her timing uneven, her mind too loud, worrying about every mistake before it even happened. But the more she played, the more her breathing settled into the rhythm, the more her heartbeat slowed to match the music. Slowly, her fingers remembered what they had always known, even without training. Music was her home and she was allowed to live here. Still, not everything was easy. There were moments she struggled, moments her fingers got stuck, moments she froze when someone nearby played flawlessly. At one point, the boy next to her, a tall student with perfect posture and polished shoes, glanced over and said softly, "You're pressing too hard on the downbeats. You'll tire yourself out." He meant it kindly, not as criticism, but Alina still felt her cheeks warm, embarrassed that someone noticed. "Thank you," she whispered, adjusting her hands, feeling clumsy but determined. When she got the flow right, he nodded, then returned to his own work without another word. Even small kindness felt huge in a place where she expected none. After class, Ms. Irina stopped her gently with a hand on her shoulder. "You have a natural voice in your music," she said. "Not trained, but instinctual." Alina nodded, unsure how to respond. "That instinct will take you far," Ms. Irina continued. "But only if you are patient enough to shape it, like clay." The words landed soft, like guidance and hope tangled together. Alina smiled, relieved. "I'll try," she said. "That is all I ever ask," the teacher replied, stepping away, her shoes clicking lightly on the wooden floor like punctuation. A few days later, the academy held a rehearsal session where students could play in front of peers for feedback. It wasn't an official performance, but it felt just as serious, just as heavy, just as full of eyes. They sat in a semicircle around a grand piano, one student at a time stepping up to play. Some were incredible, their fingers moving so fast that the keys blurred, their music structured like perfect architecture. Others stumbled but recovered quickly, their confidence catching them before they fell too hard. Every performance felt like a reminder of how far she had to go, and how far she already had come. When it was finally her turn, her heartbeat quickened, her palms dampening against her dress. She sat down, feeling the coolness of the piano bench against her legs, her knees trembling just enough to make her worry. She remembered what her brother said, "Play like you do at home." She repeated it in her mind like a prayer. "Play like you do at home." She placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes for a moment, letting her breath find its rhythm. Then she began. The first note came out small, like a whisper testing its place in the world. She moved into the opening section of her arrangement, the fusion piece she had built like a story, part classical, part her own voice. The students leaned forward slightly, curiosity pulling them in. Her timing wavered once, but she kept going, focusing on the emotion instead of fear. The middle section swelled, her fingers finding courage in movement, her back straightening as she allowed the melody to take up space. This wasn't perfection, she knew that, but it was real, and sometimes real had its own kind of shine. When she finished, there was silence for a second. Then light applause, soft but sincere. It wasn't thunder, it wasn't explosive, but it was enough to warm her chest, enough to make her eyes prick with emotion. One student raised their hand and asked, "Where did you learn to play like that?" Alina swallowed, unsure how to answer in a way that didn't sound awkward or small. "At home," she said. "In our basement." The student blinked, surprised, like they were waiting for her to name a famous mentor. "In your basement?" they repeated, confused but impressed. Alina nodded, a little shy but not ashamed. "Yes," she said simply. Ms. Irina stood up and addressed the group, her tone calm but confident. "This," she said, gesturing toward Alina, "is what raw musical voice sounds like. It is not refined yet, but it is honest, and honesty is a foundation we can build with." Hearing those words felt like someone placing a warm blanket over her shoulders, a blanket made of validation, not praise for perfection, but respect for truth, respect for trying. Later, as the room emptied out and students gathered their things, Alina lingered by the piano, her fingers lightly brushing the keys like she didn't want to say goodbye yet. She wasn't sure when Maestro Reinhardt entered the room. She didn't hear the door or the footsteps, only noticed him when his voice broke the quiet. "You rely on emotion as a shield," he said, his voice filling the space like a spotlight. Alina's body tensed, her throat tightening. But she didn't look away. She turned slowly to face him, her heart a wild flutter in her chest. "I rely on it because it's all I had," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The honesty of her answer surprised even her. Reinhardt studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without any shift in tone, he said, "Emotion is not a flaw," he continued, "but emotion without structure is chaos." He stepped closer, his posture still stern, his gaze sharp. "If you want to survive here, you must learn structure," he said, each word like the tap of a metronome. "Can you do that?" The question settled in her mind like a weight, not heavy in a painful way, but heavy in a purposeful way. She thought about her parents, her brother, the basement, the old piano with chipped keys, the sacrifices, the quiet nights of practicing until the world felt blurry. She thought about the audition stage, the trembling hands, the final chord fading into silence like a breath leaving her lungs. She thought about her acceptance, conditional but real, like a door cracked open, like a path beginning. She thought about the students around her, polished, trained, confident, but not her. She thought about music, the way it lived in her, the way it held her together when she didn't feel like she had anything else. "Yes," she said finally, her voice still quiet but solid. Reinhardt nodded once, not approval, not encouragement, just acknowledgement. "Then start over," he said, gesturing toward the piano. "Not start again. Start over." There was something powerful in those words. Not to erase what she had, but to rebuild it stronger. She sat at the piano once more, her back straight, her hands ready, her breath steady. Reinhardt stood behind her, silent but present. A guide, not a shield. A challenge, not an enemy. She placed her hands on the keys, the surface cool and familiar. Her fingers curved properly this time. Her wrists lifted, her shoulders relaxed. Ms. Irina watched from across the room with a soft smile, like she could see a seed breaking open underground, ready to grow. Alina pressed the first note. It was different this time. It wasn't trembling, it wasn't afraid, it wasn't rushed. It was deliberate, supported, intentional. It was her, but steadier. It was her voice, but clearer. It was a beginning, not a conclusion. A doorway, not a destination. That first note hung in the air like a promise to herself, to her family, to her teachers, to her fears, a promise that she would not run, a promise that she would not give up, a promise that she would learn how to build structure without losing her soul, a promise that she would grow even if growing hurt sometimes, a promise that she would become the version of herself she had always hoped existed somewhere in the future, waiting for her. One note, just one, was enough to start everything over. The first note wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It was enough. And as she continued playing, note by note, breath by breath, intention by intention, she felt it, the shift, the change, the new beginning. Her story was still messy, still uncertain, still built on shaky courage, but now it had structure too. Now it had guidance. Now it had a chance. She kept playing, and the world, for the first time, felt like it might be ready to listen. Weeks passed like chapters turning in a book she never thought she would get to read. Every morning, Alina arrived before most students, her shoes echoing in the hallways, her breath fogging slightly in the cool practice rooms. She would sit at the piano, stretch her fingers carefully, and begin with the basics, scales up and down like steady footsteps, warm-ups like whispers, arpeggios like ladders she climbed slowly. Her muscles still shook sometimes, nerves still curled like vines around her ribs. But each day, the trembling grew a little less. She was learning how to stand inside her own music without falling, learning how to trust her hands, her instincts, her growth. Some days were brutal in quiet ways, not through shouting or cruelty, but through the weight of her own expectations. The metronome would tick like a heartbeat she couldn't match. Her finger would slip on a minor scale and ruin the flow. Her wrist would lock up from tension she didn't notice building. She would stop, inhale shakily, and start again. Those moments made her chest ache with frustration. like she was trying to hold water in her hands, only to watch it spill through her fingers. Other days were soft victories. A perfectly played scale, a clean transition, a phrase that finally sounded like what she heard in her mind. Those moments felt like sunshine breaking through clouds, small but warm, enough to keep her going, enough to prove she was changing, even if slow, even if no one else saw it yet. Reinhardt watched quietly from the back of the room sometimes, never interrupting, never praising, never scolding. His presence made her posture straighten, her breath deepen, her fingers steady. It was strange how someone who intimidated her could also sharpen her focus like a lens. She had started to understand that fear and respect could exist together, not as enemies, but as partners. Fear pushed her, respect guided her, and between them, she found discipline. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult session, Ms. Irina approached her, hands tucked gently behind her back, a thoughtful look on her face. "You are beginning to breathe with the music instead of against it," she said, her voice as calm as always. Alina blinked, not sure if she had heard correctly. "Breathing with the music?" she echoed, confused. Ms. Irina nodded, her eyes crinkling slightly as if she were smiling without moving her mouth. "When you first arrived, your body fought your music," she said. "Your shoulders tensed, your wrists locked, your breathing froze." Alina remembered painfully. "But now," Ms. Irina continued, "I see you listening, not just to the piano but to yourself." Those words sat in Alina's heart like a feather landing on still water, soft, but rippling outward. She didn't know how to respond, so she just bowed her head in gratitude. Ms. Irina reached out and gently lifted Alina's chin, not forcefully, just enough to meet her gaze. "Don't hide from growth," she said, "even when it scares you." Then she walked away, leaving Alina with those words like a compass she could carry. Outside of practice rooms, the academy pulsed with activity. Students preparing for concerts, rehearsals echoing through the hallways, laughter mixing with arguments about tempo or technique. Sometimes Alina felt like she was inside a storm made of music, everyone moving so fast, like their future was already decided. She wondered if she was the only one who still felt like a question, like an unfinished sentence. But then she reminded herself that questions are where stories begin, not where they end. Saturday mornings became her favorite, not because they were easier, but because they were hers. She practiced without classes, just her and the piano, exploring sounds and shapes, building new compositions, testing her voice like stretching wings. Sometimes her family would visit, sitting quietly in the back of the room, watching her play with eyes full of pride she didn't know how to hold. Her mother would smile with her hands clasped. Her father would nod along like he understood the shape of her music even if he didn't know the terms. Her brother would tap rhythms on his knees, trying to match her tempo. Their presence was like gravity, keeping her grounded, reminding her where she started, reminding her why she kept going. But the real turning point came unexpectedly. On a Wednesday afternoon, after a long theory class that left her head spinning with terms like tonic and dominant modulation. She was packing up her sheet music when a student approached her. His name was Noel, a boy known for his technical skill and quiet confidence. He had never spoken to her before, not beyond polite nods. "Your performance last month," he said, his voice soft. "I've been thinking about it." Alina froze, her sheet music folder pressed against her chest. "Why?" she asked, confused. "Because," he said, choosing his words carefully, "you played like every note meant something." Alina didn't know how to respond, her heartbeat picking up like it wanted to sprint ahead of her. Noel continued, sliding his hands into his pockets. "Everyone here plays to prove something," he said. "But you play to feel something." He looked down like he wasn't sure if saying that was allowed. "It made me wonder if I ever do that," he admitted, voice low. Alina opened her mouth, closed it again, then finally said the only thing she could think of. "I don't know how to play any other way." Noel nodded, like that made sense, like that was an answer to a question he had been holding for a long time. Then he walked away, leaving her with a feeling she didn't know how to name. It wasn't pride, not exactly. It wasn't validation, not fully. It was something more like understanding, like realizing music wasn't just something she loved. It was something she could give, something that could live outside of her, something that could matter to someone else. That night, she stayed late at the academy, long after most students had gone home. The corridors were dim, the air cooler, the silence heavier. She found an empty concert hall, the grand piano sitting in the center like a moon in an empty sky. She walked to it slowly, reverently, like approaching something sacred. Then she sat, letting her fingers rest on the keys, not pressing, just feeling their coolness. She inhaled, exhaled, and began to play. No sheet music, no plan, just instinct, memory, emotion, and all the things she had held inside for so long. The notes spilled out like water breaking through a dam, sometimes soft like footprints in snow, sometimes bright like sunlight hitting glass, sometimes shaky, sometimes clean, but always real, always hers. She wasn't sure how long she played. Time stretched and folded, like music was bending the hours. When she finally stopped, the last note hung in the air like a question and an answer at the same time. And that's when she heard it, clapping, soft, slow, deliberate clapping. She spun around, startled, her breath catching in her throat. At the back of the hall stood Maestro Reinhardt, his silhouette framed by the dim doorway, his expression unreadable in the half-light. He walked down the aisle, shoes tapping against the floor like another instrument joining the room. When he reached the stage, he didn't sit, he didn't lecture, he didn't even look disappointed. He looked curious, like he had just witnessed something he didn't expect. "You are learning," he said simply, his voice echoing through the hall. Alina swallowed, her fingers still hovering above the keys like they were afraid to rest. "I'm trying," she replied, her voice small but steady. Reinhardt nodded once, folding his arms. "Trying is not the same as learning," he said, "but both are necessary." He gestured toward the piano. "What you played today was not structure, not technique, not control," he said, "but it was truth." Alina's breath hitched, her chest tightening in a way that felt like hope and fear tangling together. "And truth," Reinhardt continued, "is the foundation of artistry. No praise, no compliments, just that, a sentence like a spark, a sentence that felt like it could light a fire." Reinhardt turned to leave, pausing only long enough to add one more thing. "Do not let your fear outrun your progress," he said. "They are racing each other, and you choose which one wins." Then he left, the door closing behind him with a soft echo. Alina sat frozen, her heartbeat loud in her ears, her fingers pressing into the wood of the piano bench to ground herself. She didn't know if she understood everything he meant, but she understood enough. She understood that she was not the girl in the basement anymore. Not only that girl, she was someone becoming, someone changing, someone learning how to build a future note by note. Even if that future scared her, even if that future felt too big for her hands right now, she placed her hands on the keys again. This time she didn't shake. This time she didn't doubt. This time she didn't try to be perfect. She tried to be honest. And the music that followed felt like the first breath after being underwater. Relief. Her life. This was the turning point. Not because she suddenly became great. Not because everything got easy. Not because fear disappeared. But because she learned something she never knew she needed. She learned that growth isn't loud. It's quiet. It's slow. It's a question asked again and again until the answer starts to form. It's choosing to stay when leaving feels safer. It's choosing to try again, even when yesterday felt like failure. It's choosing to listen to the music inside you, even when the world outside is loud. She closed the piano lid gently, stood, and walked out with her head a little higher, her heartbeat a little steadier. Outside, the night air wrapped around her like a blanket, cool and alive. She looked up at the sky, stars barely visible between the city lights, and for the first time she didn't feel like they were far away. She felt like she was walking toward them, one note at a time. The day of the monthly evaluation arrived like a storm she heard coming long before she saw it. It wasn't the final judgment or graduation or a big performance on stage, but it still felt heavy, like a checkpoint on a long road where someone decides if she gets to keep walking. Every probation student had to perform to show improvement, to prove they belonged, to make the academy believe they were worth the time and resources. And even though she had practiced until her fingertips felt numb some nights, the fear still crept in, slower now, quieter now, but still present, like a shadow that stayed behind her no matter how bright the room was. She woke up early again, the sun not yet stretching over the bakery roof below. Her mother had already started kneading dough downstairs, her father preparing trays, her brother still asleep, curled in blankets and dreams, the smell of bread mixed with nerves in her stomach. A strange combination that made her feel like she might float or fall. She couldn't tell which. She dressed carefully, hands moving with purpose even though they trembled. Not in anything fancy, just clean clothes, a simple dress, soft shoes. Something that didn't pretend to be more than what she had. She tied her hair back so it wouldn't fall into her face while playing. A small detail, but one that made her feel ready. Before she left, her father stopped her at the door. He didn't say, "Good luck." He didn't say, "You can do it." He just handed her a small folded piece of paper. She tucked it into her pocket without opening it, trusting him, feeling its weight like a warm pebble she could grip if she needed to steady herself. Her mother squeezed her shoulders from behind, flour on her hands marking faint prints on the fabric, like a blessing or a shield. Her brother stumbled in, barely awake, hair messy, voice groggy as he mumbled, "Play like you're home." The same words as before, but deeper now, like they had roots and history. She smiled, soft and nervous, and stepped outside. The academy looked the same as always, tall and polished, windows reflecting the brightening sky. But today it felt different. Maybe it was her, not the building. Maybe she was the one who had changed. Maybe she was the one reflecting something new. Inside, the hall buzzed with quiet anxiety. Probation students sat scattered across the benches, each clutching sheet music or rubbing their hands together or whispering to themselves like prayers. Some looked confident, some looked terrified, most looked like both. Alina sat near the end of the bench, eyes down, listening to the piano chords echoing faintly through the door as someone finished their turn. She tried to match her breathing to the rhythm. Slow inhale, slower exhale, hands resting flat on her knees, palms warm with nervous heat. When her name was called, it didn't sound like a surprise this time. It didn't knock the air out of her like before. It just arrived, like a bell signaling her moment to step forward. She stood, legs shaky but working, walked to the performance room, her shoes tapping quietly against the floor like punctuation marks. Inside, the space looked smaller than the concert hall but bigger than a classroom, with chairs arranged for judges, and a perfect grand piano waiting like a test she had to solve with sound. Maestro Reinhardt sat in the center of the judging table, his posture straight, his glasses low on his nose, his gaze sharp but not cruel. Next to him sat Ms. Irina, calm as always, her presence grounding Alina even from a distance. A third judge she didn't know reviewed a file, flipping through papers that probably held assessments, notes, expectations, predictions, maybe even doubts. "Whenever you're ready," Ms. Irina said gently. The words floated over to Alina like a hand extended. Not pushing, not pulling, just waiting. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and approached the piano. Her hands hovered above the keys for a moment, the silence inside her louder than any applause or criticism she had ever heard. She chose a piece that represented what she'd learned. Not just emotion, not just instinct, not just improvisation, but structure, rhythm, breath, technique, pieces of the world she came from, stitched into the world she was learning to enter. She inhaled once, deep and steady, letting the air fill her lungs the way the music filled her mind. And then she played. The first note came like a sunrise, gentle, not trying to impress anyone, just arriving. Her fingers moved in careful patterns. the ones she had practiced again and again until muscle memory overruled fear. Each phrase was intentional, like footsteps on a carefully chosen path. Each chord was honest, not perfect, but real. There were moments where emotion wanted to take control, wanted to speed her up, wanted to make her chase the melody instead of guide it. But she caught herself, slowed down, breathed. She remembered Reinhardt's words. Do not let your fear outrun your progress. And she didn't. Not this time. Halfway through, something changed. Her hands steadied. Her breath smoothed. Her shoulders relaxed. Her body stopped fighting the music and started moving with it. Not chasing it, not dragging it, just being inside it. Like balance, like harmony, like belonging. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was proving she deserved to be here. She felt like she was being here, present, alive, whole. By the final note, she wasn't thinking about the judges or the academy or the bakery apartment or the girl she used to be. She was just thinking about the sound, the echo, the feeling of a journey still unfolding. She let the last chord linger, then lifted her hands, palms hovering for 1 second before she let them rest gently in her lap. Silence filled the room, a silence that wasn't empty, but full of breath, of possibility, of questions and answers living in the same space. No one spoke. For 5 long seconds that felt like 5 long minutes, that felt like 5 long months. Alina breathed in that silence, trying not to crumble under it, trying to believe silence didn't always mean rejection. Sometimes silence meant reflection. Sometimes silence meant respect. Reinhardt was the one who broke it. He didn't sigh, he didn't smirk. He didn't lean back in boredom. He leaned forward like he was looking closer, hearing something still ringing even after the notes had stopped. You listened, he said, his voice low but clear. Not to her, not to the room, but to the music. You listened to the music instead of yourself, he continued. And because of that, the music listened back. Alina didn't understand fully, not yet, but she felt something warm unfold inside her. A quiet pride, not loud like fireworks, but steady like a lantern. Yes, Ms. Irina added, her smile gentle. Your technique is still developing. Your timing still fights you sometimes, but your growth is undeniable. The third judge nodded, scribbling a final note. She follows correction. They said simply, and she adapts. Reinhardt closed the folder in front of him, the sound soft but final. Your probation is lifted, he announced. The words didn't hit her like lightning. They landed like rain on soil, slowly sinking in, slowly feeding something, slowly becoming real. You are now a full student of the academy, he finished. Alina's breath caught, her hand flying to her mouth. Her eyes burning with emotion she couldn't hide even if she tried. This wasn't a crown or a trophy or applause. This was something quieter, something deeper. This was belonging, not handed to her but built by her, note by note, breath by breath, moment by moment. She bowed, not out of habit, but out of gratitude, for the challenge, for the doubt, for the chance, for herself, for not giving up. When she stepped outside the room, her family was waiting in the hallway. The moment her mother saw her face, tears welled up in her eyes before she even heard the words. Her father exhaled, long and relieved, wiping his face with his sleeve like he didn't care who saw. Her brother hugged her so hard she almost lost her balance, laughing and crying at the same time. What did they say? He asked, pulling back, eyes bright. Alina placed a hand over her heart, still beating fast, still alive with music. They said I can stay, she whispered, voice shaky but sure. I get to stay. The bakery would still need work. The bills would still need paying. Practice would still be hard. Mistakes would still happen. Fear would still knock sometimes. But she had something now she never had before. A place, path, a future she could see forming like a horizon. Not clear yet, not full yet, but there, waiting, inviting, possible. That night, when she finally got home, exhausted in the best way, she remembered the folded paper in her pocket. She opened it slowly, carefully, like it might fall apart in her hands. It was her father's handwriting, uneven, rushed, flour smudged in one corner. It said, "Don't fear being unfinished. The world needs stories in progress." She pressed the note to her chest, eyes closed, letting the words sink in like sunlight on soil, because she finally understood. Being unfinished wasn't failure. Being unfinished meant there was more to come, and she was ready for it. Every note, every lesson, every mistake, every stage, every silence, and every verdict still ahead. She was ready, not perfect, not fearless, just ready, and sometimes that is enough. Sometimes that is everything. Months passed, not loudly, not in big dramatic scenes, but in steady moments, the kind that build a life piece by piece. Alina's routine had changed without her even realizing it. Mornings were for scales and warm-ups, afternoons for classes and theory, evenings for homework and practice, and sometimes quiet walks home under the streetlights. It sounded simple when she described it, but it felt like everything, like a map revealing itself one step at a time. At the academy, her acceptance spread slowly, not as gossip, not as praise, just as a fact stitched into the place. People no longer whispered, "She's the girl from nowhere." Now they said, "She's the one who got better." It was such a small change in words, but to her, it felt like someone had shifted the entire earth 1 inch closer to her feet. Not everyone warmed to her, and that was okay. Some students were friendly but distant, polite but guarded, the way people are when they aren't sure if you'll stay. Others watched her like she was still being tested, like probation was a shadow that might return any day, and a few simply didn't know she existed. Lost in their own worlds of deadlines and rehearsals and pressure, she didn't blame them. Everyone had their own mountain to climb. She was learning that some paths don't intersect, and that doesn't mean they're wrong. But there were also people who chose to walk beside her, even if just for a few steps. Noel, the boy who had spoken to her once, sometimes practiced in the same room. No words exchanged, but a quiet companionship formed in the way they respected each other's space. A girl named Hannah shared sheet music with her once, smiling shyly before running back to her lesson. Like kindness was something she was learning how to use. Even small things felt big to Alina. Even small kindnesses felt like doorways. Reinhardt remained a constant, steady and sharp. He didn't become soft, he didn't become affectionate. He didn't suddenly transform into someone who praised every improvement. But his comments changed. They became less like swords and more like chisels, shaping instead of striking. Again, he would say, "Your timing slipped. Better, but not anchored yet. You are hearing the music now, but you must also direct it." It was never gentle, but it was never cruel. It was challenge, and challenge had become a language she could understand, sometimes even appreciate. One day, during a class break, she overheard two students talking, their voices carrying without malice or intention, just conversation. "I thought she'd never last," one said. "But she's still here. She's not like us," the other replied. "But somehow that works for her." They didn't notice she was near, but she didn't hide. She didn't shrink, didn't flee the room. She just breathed, because for the first time the words didn't sting. They didn't feel like judgment. They felt like observation. They felt like truth. She was different, but different didn't mean wrong. Different didn't mean less. After probation ended, she got her first official student badge. It had her name printed in clean letters and the academy crest in gold at the corner. Her hands trembled as she held it, the plastic warm from her palms. Her brother demanded to take a picture of her with it, her parents insisting she frame it on the wall at home. When she hung it over the piano in the basement, it didn't look like a trophy. It looked like a reminder, not of what she achieved, but of what she chose. She chose to stay, to risk, to try, to begin. The bakery became a place where people whispered not out of pity, but out of pride. "Did you hear? Their daughter is at the academy. She plays like the music lives inside her bones. I saw her practicing once. I swear the walls hummed." Her parents would blush and wave away the comments, but their eyes sparkled, betraying their pride. And Alina learned something important. Pride doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes pride sits quietly at a dinner table, smiling into a plate of food, shoulders finally relaxed for the first time in years. At school, teachers heard about her journey and treated her differently too. Not like she was special, but like she had chosen something real, like she had committed to something most people are afraid to even name out loud. Dreams are scary. Dreams demand pieces of you. Dreams ask for time, energy, mistakes, fear. Not everyone understands, but some do, and those people are worth holding on to gently, the way she held her music. Months later, the Academy announced a winter recital, an event where selected students would perform on stage in front of families, staff, and donors. She didn't expect to be chosen. She didn't even think her name would be considered, but a week before the recital, Reinhardt approached her after class, a slip of paper in his hand. "You will perform third," he said simply, handing her the paper. She stared at him, mouth slightly open, mind struggling to understand. "Me?" she asked, confusion and shock weaving through her voice. Reinhardt raised an eyebrow. "Unless there is another student here with your name." Her cheeks flushed, heat rushing up her neck. She bowed her head quickly. "Thank you," she said, the words tiny but full. He nodded once, turning away as if the matter was settled. Just before he reached the doorway, he paused. Without looking back, he said, "Do not aim to impress us. Aim to communicate." That night, she didn't sleep, not out of fear but out of energy. Like her veins carried music instead of blood. Like her body was rehearsing before she even touched the piano. On recital day, the backstage air smelled like polished wood and stage lights and nervous sweat. Students in pressed clothes whispered final reminders to themselves, tapping rhythms on their knees. Some prayed, some stretched their fingers. Others simply stared at their hands like strangers they were trying to understand. Alina took her place, hands tucked behind her back, breathing carefully. She didn't try to kill the fear. She let it sit beside her. Fear could stay as long as courage stayed too. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage, the lights warm on her skin like sunlight after winter. The audience blurred into shapes and shadows, just outlines, no faces. She didn't search for her family in the crowd, didn't look for Reinhardt or Ms. Irina. She looked only at the piano, the instrument she had followed from a basement with peeling paint to this stage under golden lights. She sat, straightened her posture, curled her fingers gently, closed her eyes, inhaled, exhaled. Then she played, not like she was proving herself, not like she was begging to be seen, not like she was fighting for a place, but like she already had one, like she was speaking a language her body always knew, like she was sending a message across a bridge that only music could build. Midway through her piece, she felt it, a shift, a click, a settling, like puzzle pieces sliding into place. Her breath matched the rhythm. Her pulse aligned with the tempo. Her hands moved like memory and intention finally met each other. She didn't feel like she was playing at the piano. She felt like she was playing with it, like they were partners, like they trusted each other. When the final note faded, silence rose once more. Not cold, not empty, not uncertain, but full, rich, alive, like the air itself held applause inside it, waiting for permission to let go. Then the audience clapped, not politely, not impatiently, not as obligation, but warmly, like hands speaking, like hearts answering, like sound meeting sound. She didn't cry, she didn't collapse, she just bowed, eyes soft, heartbeat steady, because she understood something now. The goal wasn't perfection, it was connection, and she had connected with them, with the piano, with herself. After the recital, her family found her, all talking at once, her mother wiping her eyes, her father pretending not to, her brother vibrating with joy like a string plucked too hard. Reinhardt didn't approach her, and she didn't expect him to, but later, as she walked the hallway carrying her music folder, she saw him speaking to another teacher. He glanced at her, just for a moment, and nodded. Once, it was not approval, not praise, not affection. It was acknowledgement, the language of someone who believes in you quietly, the language of someone who knows the story isn't finished. She nodded back, the language of someone who intends to finish it. That night, back at home, she sat at the old basement piano, the chipped keys familiar under her fingertips. The Academy's badge hung above it on the wall, catching the light. She pressed one key, a soft note, just one, like the beginning of something new again, because beginnings don't run out, because growth doesn't stop, because dreams don't expire, because music doesn't end where fear begins. She smiled, a small curve of the lips that felt like music too. Then she began to play, not to prove, not to audition, not to persuade, but because she loved it, because she chose it, because it was hers, and somewhere far away, in a world she was still learning to enter, a stage waited, a spotlight waited, a future waited, and she was coming, not perfectly, not without trembling, but fully, bravely, honestly, one note at a time.